So the first site is Masjid al-Quba, and this is the first masjid that was built after the migration of the Muslims from Mecca to Medina. And that's why this is known as the first masjid of Islam, because only in Medina actually the Islamic system was implemented. So under that, this was the first mosque that was constructed. And the Prophet ﷺ every Saturday after praying the Fajr prayers in Masjid Nabi used to go by foot or on his camel towards the village of Quba, because at that time this was actually a separate village from Yathrib, and he used to go there to meet the people and used to pray the Ishraq Nawafil in this mosque. And regarding this mosque, the Prophet ﷺ said that praying 2 rakats of nafil over here is equivalent to performing Umrah. And this is a virtue that no masjid, no mosque in the world has except for Masjid al-Quba. And then right next to Masjid al-Quba is the well of Khatam. And this was the place where the ring of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, which he used to stamp and sign the letters at that time, which was then given to Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh. And after him, the next Khalifa, Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh. And after him, Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anh. So in the era of Uthman radiallahu anh, this ring actually fell into a well which was present over here accidentally by Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anh, and was lost forever. Then we have the well of Izq, and this place is right next to Masjid al-Quba, which you can see in the background. This is the place actually where upon arrival in Quba during the migration, during the Hijrah, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and with him Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, they sat over here, and the Ansar came from Medina to greet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this picture was actually taken in the year 2022. So after that, this place was demolished for the purpose of renovation. So as we speak, in the year of 2025, hopefully it would be ready soon. And then the next place we have is Masjid Banu Unaf, and this is the place where Prophet ﷺ came and prayed. And the really unique thing about this masjid is that if you pray where the mihrab of this masjid is, and you prostrate, you go into the sajda, the place where your forehead actually touches is exactly the place where the feet of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to be present. So this is an important tip, that if you get a chance to go pray, visit this mosque, make sure that you pray actually in the place where the mihrab is. The next site is Masjid al-Jum'ah, and this is the place where the Prophet ﷺ, when he departed from the village of Quba towards Yathrib, stopped briefly because it was Friday and the time for Jummah prayers had arrived. So over here he stopped and delivered the first Friday sermon. So in this place a mosque was then later built and is now known as Masjid al-Jum'ah. Then we have another site which is known as Masjid Uthman bin Malik, and again the Prophet ﷺ, this place belonged to a companion who was blind, so he could not come to Masjid Nabawi for each and every prayer. So he requested the Prophet ﷺ to come to his house and pray somewhere so he could build a mosque over there. So the Prophet ﷺ complied with his request, and this is the place where the Prophet prayed. Then we have the well of Khars, and regarding this well, the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that its water is from amongst the waters of Jannah, paradise. And he also, in his will, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that he be given ghusl from the water of this well. So the next site is the farm of the notable and the famous companion of the Prophet ﷺ, who was Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu anh, who actually belonged to the area of Persia. And he had come all the way from Persia in search for the truth. And he became the owner of this farm after Banu Qurayza were expelled from Medina, because they used to own the areas over here. So Sayyidina Salman Farsi became the owner of this farm, and he used to be very generous regarding the produce of this farm. So he used to donate a lot to poor and needy people. The next place is known as Mashrab Ibrahim, and this is the place where Sayyidah Maria Qibtiyya used to live, and it is from her that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his third son, who he named as Ibrahim. But then Sayyidina Ibrahim passed away while he was still an infant, so he and also his mother Sayyidah Maria Qibtiyya, who was then known as Ibrahim. Both of them were buried over here. So their graves are present over here. And then the next place is the fort of Ka'b bin Ashraf, who was actually one of the top enemies, and he was a Jew, enemies of Islam. And he was actually commanded by the Prophet ﷺ to be killed. After his antics and his actions, they crossed all limits. So he was then killed by some companions of the Prophet ﷺ. The event of which is really interesting, and you can read it in the books of Seerah. Then we have the grave of Abu Ubaidah bin Harith radiallahu anh, and he was one of the 14 people who were martyred in the Battle of Badr. And he was amongst the three initial people who came out to fight the three people of Quraysh during the duels. So what happened was that Utbah, Sheba, and Walid, they came from the side of the Kuffar, and Hamza ibn Muttalib and Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anh, and the third one, Abu Ubaidah bin Harith radiallahu anh. These were the three who came out to fight against them. And Sayyidina Abu Ubaidah bin Harith radiallahu anh, was actually quite old. So he got injured during this duel, and from that wound, he passed away on the way back to Medina, right next to the village of Badr. So this is his grave, because regarding the martyrs, it's said that they should be buried where they passed away. So he passed away while the Muslims were on their way back from Badr to Medina. So he was buried on the way. Then we have Masjid al-Arish, and this is the place where the camp of the Prophet ﷺ was placed during the Battle of Badr, from which he was seeing the complete situation of the Battle of Badr. And right next to Masjid al-Arish, right in front of it, is actually where the battleground of the war was, the battleground of the Battle of Badr. So the complete Battle of Badr took place over here, and from this you can understand that Muslims were placed right over here, and the Prophet's camp was behind them at a little height, and the Kuffar, their army was towards the right hand side of this picture. And then we have the graveyard of Badr, and in it the 14 martyrs, or actually 13 martyrs of the Battle of Badr, were buried, because the 14th one, as we discussed before, Sayyidina Abu Ubaidah bin Harith, was buried outside Badr because he passed away after the battle. So the rest of them were buried inside this graveyard. And then after this, because Badr was actually a small village, so its residents in the coming years and centuries, they actually built the central graveyard of the village. Next to it, the graves of the Shuhada, the martyrs, were present. Then we have the Jabal al-Malaik, and this was the mountain upon which the angels descended during the Battle of Badr. And this is actually, if you see this picture, so in the rear of this picture, meaning from where this picture is taken, so behind it actually is this mountain that you see over right here. Then we have the valley and well of Rawha. And regarding this valley, the Prophet ﷺ said that this is amongst the finest of valleys in Arabia. And the well of Rawha, regarding this, the Prophet ﷺ said that more than 70 messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have drunk from this well. So this is actually the mountain of Uhud, taken from a bit of a distance. And in this picture, you actually see where the battlefield of Uhud was. So if you could look at this map, this is the place where the Muslim army was present, and this is the place where the enemy army was present. And the Prophet ﷺ positioned the Muslim army in such a way that the mountain of Uhud would be behind their backs to act as a support, and to ensure that the army of Far don't head towards the city of Medina. So they're always in their sights. This is a small hill of Rumat, and this is the place where many of you might know the archers, the 50 archers, were placed by the Prophet ﷺ to ensure that the Quraysh, the Kuffar, could not attack the Muslim army from behind. Then we have the graveyard of the 70 martyrs of this battle, and in it also is the grave of Sayyidina Hamza bin Muttalib radiallahu anh, who was the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, and an incredibly brave and deadly warrior. And he was martyred by Wahshi, the event of which you can again see in the books of Seerah. And this Wahshi actually then converted to Islam after the conquest of Makkah. Then we have Masjid al-Fasih. This is the place after the battle where the Prophet ﷺ rested, and his wounds were attended to, and also prayed the prayer of Dhuhr in this place while sitting down. Then we have the cave of Uhud, which you can see over here, this small slit inside the mountain. And this is the place where the Prophet ﷺ and the companions took refuge after the Battle of Uhud, and in which they climbed up the mountain and the kuffar could not then reach them. Then the last two sites of this set are a couple of masajids. The first one is Masjid al-Mustarah. This is the place upon the return from Uhud towards Medina where the Prophet ﷺ actually rested. So that's why the name of this mosque is Al-Mustarah, which means actually to rest. And then the second mosque, which is actually nearer to Masjid al-Nabwi and known as Masjid al-Shaykhain. This is the place when going from Medina towards Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ again camped for the night and took a view of his army and then sent back the underaged companions to Medina. And this place is known as Shaykhain because Shaykh in Arabic means an old person. So in this area, an old couple used to live. So that's why this area was known as Shaykhain. So this masjid came to be known as Masjid al-Shaykhain. The first site in this is Masjid al-Raya, and this is the place where the tent of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was present during the Battle of Trench, during the Battle of Khandak. And this is a picture from inside the mosque. It has to be noted that this construction is actually a renovated construction, which is only recently done. So this is not an old construction. This is hardly 5 to 6 years ago that this type of construction was done for this mosque. Then we have the area of the seven masajids, and this is known as the place of seven masajids or Sab'a Masajid. When you go to Medina, you'll be referring to this place as Sab'a Masajid. Because seven different mosques were present over here. And these mosques were actually the places where the camps of the companions were present during the Battle of the Trench. And in these places, in the era of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, mosques were built and named after various companions of the Prophet. So seven mosques were present. That's why this place is known as Sab'a Masajid. But then after that, you see a central mosque over here. So around 3 to 4 mosques came into the size of this main central mosque, and 3 masajids remained as they were, in which we see over here Masjid al-Fath, there's Masjid Salman Farsi over here, and then not 3 but 4, a couple of masajids are present over here as well. Then we have Masjid Qiblatain. This is the place where the revelation regarding the change of Qibla from Masjid al-Aqsa towards Masjid al-Haram came. So that came during the prayer of Dhuhr. So the Prophet ﷺ was leading the prayer, and during the prayer, Angel Jibreel came with the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has turned the Qibla from Masjid al-Aqsa towards Masjid al-Haram. So the Prophet, in the state of prayer, immediately turned and saw that all the rows of Muslims behind him. So that's why this mosque is known as Qiblatan, meaning the masjid with 2 Qiblas. And this is actually indicated by these 2 minars and these 2 domes as well. They are 2 in number to indicate that this masjid has 2 Qiblas. Then we have the well of Ruma or Bi'r Ruma. This is the well, it actually belonged to a Jew. And this was one of the few wells in the city of Medina, the water of which was sweet. But this Jew used to sell its water to Muslims at a very expensive price. So the Prophet ﷺ asked his companions that whoever buys this well and then donates it for the Muslims, I promise him a place in paradise. So Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anh bought this well from this Jew and then donated it to the Muslims. Then we have the Masjid al-Fath, and this is the place where for 3 consecutive days Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his help against the kuffar, which were 10,000 in numbers and encamped all around the city of Medina during the Battle of Trench. And on the 3rd day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help came and he sent a very severe storm in which the tents, the animals, and everything belonging to the kuffar was uprooted, and they were forced to finish the siege of Medina and return back. Then there's this Masjid Bani Haram, because the place where the trench was actually dug was near to this clan of Bani Haram. So this was a place where the Prophet ﷺ actually prayed. And the event of actually feeding around 1,000 people from just the meat of one goat, which is narrated by Sayyidina Jabir radiallahu anh, actually also took place in this place. And right next to this mosque is actually a small cave. And this is the place where Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, during the days of the Battle of Trench, actually used to come here and spend some nights over here in this cave. And then the second last site is Masjid Bani Ghaffar, which is placed on the mountain of Sila. This is known as Sila mountain. So this is also a place where the Prophet ﷺ came and prayed. And the last site is the Saqifa Banu Sa'ada. This is right next and adjacent to where Masjid Nabi is present today. And this place actually belonged to the Khazraj tribe in Medina of the Ansar. And after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the Ansar gathered over here and they were about to pledge allegiance to Sayyidina Sa'ad bin Ubadah, who was the leader of Khazraj tribe, as to be their Khalifa. But Umar radiallahu anh came with Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh and convinced the Ansar, and also told them that the Prophet ﷺ said that the caliphate would run in the tribe of Quraysh. So all the Ansar present over there, they then pledged allegiance on the hand of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq to be the first Khalifa of Muslims.